I want to do an exercise that we've started doing on the show. We did it with Eddie Spaghetti. We did it with Brett. I'm doing it with all my guests now, talking about 30-minute bands. And the idea behind this is if you look at a mixtape of a high school prospect or hell, an NBA guy, like you could show me a mixtape of certain NBA guys. I'm like, oh my God, it's either him or MJ who's the best one ever. Like, let's have that debate. If you were to put together just the mixtape, could you convince yourself by a certain band that if you just listen to this part of their catalog, they are the greatest band in the world? They are better than the Beatles. And so with that, Nate, who are your 30-minute bands?
Let me throw one out here for you. I'm a child of the 80s. I think one of the bands that jumps out to me, and it's a band that I really enjoy, but one of the ones that jumps out to me as a 30-minute band is In Excess. And the reason I throw that out there is because, for me in particular, I can listen to In Excess Kick on repeat for 2 weeks. I can listen to that album over and over and over and over and over again and not get tired of it. Kick to me is the pinnacle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Kick to me is its own greatest hits album, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a huge fan of the early stuff that they were doing before they became popular and before they popped on MTV. And even towards the tail end before Michael Hutchence died, they kind of started going off in some directions, and there was some musical stuff that I just really wasn't into of what they were doing. But if I sit there and listen to that album, and in particular some of the cuts, I could shrink it down to 30 minutes, and you'd be convinced that every single thing that band ever released was just banging and was top 10, and Casey Kasem was talking about them every single week on the countdown. And yet, if all of a sudden I start playing you like some Listen Like Thieves, or we start to dip into X and some of the stuff that came later, you might be like, all right, like seriously, what were these guys like? What were these guys on when they did this?
I had an interesting conversation with my 11-year-old the other day. She asked me who is the greatest band of all time. Who are some of the people in the conversation? And obviously the Beatles come up, and Led Zeppelin, and the Rolling Stones, and Pink Floyd, and the big 70s bands came up. And another one came up in my head, and after thinking about it for way too long, like even longer than this monologue, I realized they're actually, for me personally, only a 30-minute band. So this is going to be controversial. Some people would say they're the greatest band of all time. I think they're a 30-minute band, and their name is Queen. For Queen, if you took out the live performance, the songwriting, and the musicianship, some people would say they were just as good as the Beatles. Like they were just absolutely on that tier, that they are peers to the same bands that I just laid out. And then I started looking at it, I was like, man, after 30 minutes, I'm good. So once you get past that 30 minutes, which is a 30-minute mix, I tried it on Spotify, you're getting into songs I never need to hear. So how can I say they're the best band of all time if I don't want to listen to their most famous songs ever again?